London, Wednesday, August 13th, 1890. As we dodge Baker Street traffic and make our way towards Building 221B, our friend, mentor, and employer, Sherlock Holmes, darts through the front door and whistles for a cab. We join him just as he climbs aboard a Clarence carriage. "Excellent. I had just about given up on you lads." He taps on the glass window behind the front driver. "Temple-on-Thames, and don't spare the whip. This is a matter of police business." We question Holmes as the growler races through busy London traffic, but our employer is tight-lipped, giving us little. On more than one occasion he checks his pocket watch with discontent. "Murder? Are you certain, Holmes?" Wiggins shouts as we jostle in the cab, the carriage wheels grinding with a roar over a section of cobblestones. "So I'm told." Holmes checks his pocket watch again. "Damn," he mutters. Luck is on our side as we manage to weave through traffic and make our way to the Temple in short order. Two bobbies meet us and hastily escort us across the gardens onto the river embankment. Men in dark robes bow their heads in prayer, gathered on the outskirts of a commotion of police officers. "Clear a path, please. Let us through," Holmes calls out, leading us through the chaotic scene. "Mr. Holmes," a familiar voice shouts, waving us over to the very edge of the embankment, where a wool blanket covers a large mass on the ground. Once again we find ourselves greeted by the Metropolitan Police's first inspector of the Thames River Division, Archibald Cray. Formal handshakes all round. "Well, Inspector, I must insist we get right to it. You telephoned about a body." "A murder," the chap on the line insisted. "No chance of an accidental drowning?" Without wasting a moment, the inspector flips over the blanket, revealing a naked male body. "No chance," the inspector says in a deadpan manner. The man, about 56 years of age, lays white as a ghost, save a spattering of discolored bruises. Even more noteworthy than the apparent beating is the most unusual position for a corpse, especially a drowned corpse, completely hunched over in the fetal position. There's no sign of ropes or bindings at the quick first glance, but upon closer scrutiny Wiggins lets out a cry. "Blimey, would you look at that?" Holmes, already kneeling by the body, examines the sight of Wiggins's excitement. The tiniest of metal restraints, scarcely bigger than common finger rings. The set of irons links the two thumbs together, then in turn attaches directly to the big toes. The entire contraption is no bigger than a small cigarette case, forcing the body into a singular position. "A most clear-cut case, Inspector," Holmes says as he moves around behind the body and tilts his head in an awkward angle, allowing himself a better view of a brand seared into the flesh, a rudimentary depiction of a perching avian creature. "An owl, consensus of my lads." Wiggins takes out his notebook and, hovering his paper and pen just above the brand, traces the image to nigh perfection. "Indeed, Inspector. Has anyone meeting his description been reported missing? Without a single scrap of personal effects, we might have a time getting an identification." A nasal voice responds, "Father Nathaniel Clifford, God rest his soul." We look up to see a priest in his 60s, his face long with permanent fatigue etched into the bags under his eyes. Neatly parted hair and a well-trimmed mustache and beard speak to a man of formality and routine. The priest crosses himself, then brings a wooden crucifix to his lips. Holmes and Wiggins rise to their feet. "You knew him, Father?" "Very well. We've worked together in the same parish for many years." "Your name, please, Father, for the record," Inspector Cray inquires. "Father Jonathan O'Connor." The priest kneels down and whimpers over his friend, reciting a number of prayers as best he can manage. After a moment, a strong scent of frankincense washes over us, interrupting Father O'Connor's attention. When he rises, he looks across through the bobbies standing about, among the crowd of gathered holy men and temple scholars, meeting the gaze of a man carrying a single-chain thurible burning with incense. Unlike everyone else, this man wears a white hooded cloak set with a distinct Red Cross pattern. Father O'Connor's eyes narrow momentarily as he mutters, "Rossignol." "What's that now?" Cray perks up. "Nothing, Inspector. Please, notify me immediately when Father Clifford's remains are to be released from the police coroner." As Father O'Connor departs, Holmes looks to his pocket watch yet again. "Lads, I've got to catch a rail to Dover. I'll have to leave this case in your capable hands. That is, of course, if the inspector here wants our services." "Of course, Holmes. That's why I sent for you, lads. I can already sense this won't be an open and shut case, and the Bishop of London himself, His Reverence Geoffrey Castrell, is already on my back. Any help you or your lads can give is most appreciated." As we depart, Wiggins stops for a moment before the priests gathered in prayer. "Rossignol?" he asks. One of the temple scholars nearby calls out, "Godfrey Rossignol, the temple master. He was here a moment ago. He must have returned to the temple church." Though Holmes left for a trip to Dover, if there's one thing we've learned about our employer, it's that he's full of surprises. For this reason, we settle on visiting the office, expecting the unexpected tip or lead. We arrive to an empty workspace. Even Mrs. Hudson isn't on the premises today. Disappointed and a bit irritated that we wasted our time returning to Baker Street, Wiggins plops down in the boss's chair. His heavy sigh instantly turns to a bark of pain. "What the devil?" he calls out, spinning around to find a small envelope pinned to the back support of the chair. "How do we miss this, lad?" Wiggins opens the envelope and finds 2 letters inside. The first he recognizes as Holmes's handwriting and proceeds to read it aloud. "Gents, I hope the case is going well. I suspect there's quite a bit more to it than it appears. The whole affair feels personal to me. It has the air of an internal family squabble of sorts, and you know those affairs always seem to boil down to some family secret. Have you had words with the priest who identified the body, Father O'Connor, and words with the bishop himself, Geoffrey Castrell? How did their accounts compare? Sometimes the greatest truths are not found in what is being told, but in what's not being told. I'd be careful of wild witch hunts on this one, lads. I'm most certain that the murderer is nearer than you suspect. Enclosed, I'm leaving you a most unusual letter dropped off to the office by an unknown party. Even though I'm not quite sure how it fits in, it would seem someone intends to put us on the right track, or perhaps the wrong track. I leave that for your keen minds to deduce. Happy hunting." The desk officer at Scotland Yard greets us with a twist of his moustache. "Ah, Holmes's boys. What can I do for you two?" Leaning on the desk with one arm, Wiggins removes his hat and runs his fingers through his hair. "We're hoping you have something more for us on this clergyman they pulled from the Thames." "Well, being a Christian man myself, I always keep an eye on any cases that involve the faith." Wiggins pauses and looks to the officer with raised brows. "Well, don't hold back on us, old boy. Give us something so we can bring the scoundrel responsible to justice." Pulling out a large record book, the desk officer flips the pages, thumbing through with intense focus. "Right. Now, lads, we don't have a thing on this Father, Nathaniel Clifford." Wiggins nods, allowing the officer to continue. "But there's this butcher." "Butcher?" Wiggins arches back in confusion. "That's right, butcher. Ah, here he is. Todd Blackswift." "What in the world does a butcher have to do with anything? We're not looking for a pound of veal, man." A half-grin escapes Wiggins's face. "Hold on, give me a chance. This butcher is one eldritch fellow. He's known about town as an authority on that occult business." "Pretty loose. I'm not quite sure how an occult expert plays. Besides, there must be a good number of occult practitioners, if not experts, in the city." Reading from the ledger, the desk officer continues. "Right, but not many who were brought in last year for a most bizarre poisoning and ritualistic murder of a clergyman." Wiggins turns the ledger around and reviews the paper himself. "No conviction." "Aye, they don't know how he did it, but somehow he slithered out of that one. I was here for the day they brought him in, and I tell you, that bloke's guilty of 100 crimes we know nothing about." Spinning the book halfway around, the desk officer continues to another page as Wiggins looks on. "And then there's this chap here, Charles Allerton." After a moment of review, Wiggins pushes the ledger back to the officer in a fit of disappointment. "A scholar? With complaints the court wouldn't even review. I thought you had something for us, man." With a snap, the desk officer slams the ledger close and leans forward. "Look, lads, I told you I keep an eye on these matters. This Allerton is one of those Darwin fanatics. The complaints on record are minor, but they're all filed by local clergymen for this bloke's pushy, aggressive attitude street-preaching science outside the churches during Sunday services." Leaning back with a big exhale, the officer continues. "Granted, this educated Allerton fellow isn't likely a murder suspect, but a fellow like him might very well know the criminal with a gripe against the church. Take it or leave it, lads. That's all Scotland Yard has at the moment." The side entrance to Bart's hospital morgue is uncharacteristically locked. After waiting for about 20 minutes to no avail, we enter through the hospital's main entrance and make our way directly to the lower level. Our attention immediately falls to the scraping noise of a saw cutting through bone. It doesn't take long to trace its origin. We enter the cadaver processing room, expecting to find our old companion, Thomas Blood. Instead, we see a tall, gangly man hovering over a slabbed corpse. "Sorry, old boy. We thought you were Thomas Blood." The chap methodically places his saw down on a wheeled cart at his side and rises to face us. Not just a gangly man, but a giant of a gangly man. 40s, narrow-faced, with hardly a strand of facial hair, apparently all of it detoured to his crown, where it lies stretched directly back, appearing more like the feathering of a bird's neck than proper human hair. Looking to us with piercing blue eyes behind large magnifying spectacles makes him even more bird-like. "Thomas is away from hospital today. Dr. Jean Martin Mandrake at your service." Wiggins steps closer and looks up to Dr. Mandrake. "We're assisting Scotland Yard in the Father Clifford case, and we're wondering if the body revealed any information." Dr. Mandrake plucks off the fingers of his gloves one at a time. "Good timing, gentlemen. I just finished with Mr. Clifford about an hour ago." He walks to the sink at the far wall and washes his hands as he continues. "There's not much to report on Father Clifford's death. The bruises on the body were superficial, including the brand. All most assuredly painful when inflicted, but of no significant harm. The cause of death was clearly drowning. Bound as he was, the victim had no hope of saving himself. The only other thing to note was mild damage to the nasal passageways." Dr. Mandrake takes up a towel to dry his hands and turns to face us. "A slight grassy smell leads me to suspect chloroform. Given a once-over, drugged, shackled, then dumped in the Thames. That isn't much to go on," Wiggins groans. Crossing the room to a recessed shelf on the wall, Dr. Mandrake withdraws a binder. He places it atop an empty gurney and flips among the pages. "As for the other bodies—" We step closer, Wiggins's head shaking slightly in confusion. "Come again? Other bodies?" Mandrake pauses for a moment. "I only assumed you would be interested in the details of the 2 other murdered priests." All we can muster is a nod. The doctor turns his attention to the binder and continues. "Father Adrian Wolseley. Cause of death, destructive deformation of the skull and brain by excessive weight." He looks to us. "Crushed to death. Strangely, the body was found on open ground. No obvious signs of the source of the weight." Wiggins quickly withdraws his writing ledger as Dr. Mandrake continues. "The second victim, one Father William Andrews. His means of death was a bit more to the point. Incineration." Dr. Mandrake leaves the gurney and opens a nearby drawer, removing a number of waxed paper bags. He rummages through them for a moment until finding 2 of particular interest. As he returns the unwanted ones to the drawer, he begins again. "Though Thomas examined the bodies in detail, I took a particular interest in these cases. I inquired and found out that in both instances a velocipede wheel track was found near the bodies. In the case of Father Wolseley, a piece of broken glass was also found near the body, a fragment of a chemist's vial, with a partial inscription, Holborn Viaduct. I suspect the vial contained chloroform, but due to the extent of Wolseley's head wound, the presence of the drug could not be confirmed." After a moment of catching up in his writings, Wiggins looks to Dr. Mandrake. "I don't understand. Why didn't anyone from Scotland Yard tell us of this?" Retrieving the 2 paper bags, Mandrake continues. "As I understand it, gentlemen, both murders took place on church grounds, and as such the church itself has launched its own investigation into the matter." Dr. Mandrake spills the contents of the first bag before us. "Another peculiarity, gentlemen. This small yarn bird was found atop Father Wolseley's chest." The second bag overturns before us. "And this golden owl locket, the only surviving element around Andrew's charred bones. Do they mean anything to you?" "Not yet, Doctor. Not yet, but all in good time." A large gathering of flower arrangements rests against the door of 135 Queen Victoria Street. We knock, unsure if Father Clifford lived alone. When no one answers, Wiggins calls upon his trusty black purse, a small collection of metal picks and tools used for more nefarious purposes in another life. Inside we find the quintessential example of a priest's home, clean, orderly, austere, and unassuming. With nothing seemingly out of place and nothing of note, we leave as quietly as we arrived. Outside, an older woman with teary eyes adds a new bouquet to the arrangement.
"Shame, absolute shame. I saw him not 2 days ago at the Temple Church," she laments.
We nod and begin to pass her as she continues.
"Couldn't bring myself to go to Bart's Hospital. I just don't have the strength to say goodbye to him in person."
We sit waiting for Father O'Connor at 30 High Holborn in an overwhelmingly maroon-themed parlour. Equidistantly placed Christian relics line the wall, and a strong fragrance of myrrh lingers. A notable silence also lingers in the chamber, as one might expect in the middle of a church sermon, but the silence is somehow off-putting. An artificial nature, otherwise difficult to articulate, settles upon us. We both grow increasingly uncomfortable as we wait. "Greetings. I'm Father Jonathan O'Connor. I recollect seeing you briefly earlier today at the temple, but I do not recall your names or ranks." We rise and shake hands with our host. After a quick introduction, Wiggins continues. "We're not with the police per se. We work with Mr. Sherlock Holmes, aiding Scotland Yard in their investigations from time to time." Taking a seat across from us, Father O'Connor crosses his legs beneath his flowing gown. "I see. Then, gentlemen, may I say a prayer for the effort you now undertake?" We look to each other, then Wiggins turns back to Father O'Connor. "Certainly." Father O'Connor stands, forms the cross with his index and tall fingers, then holds up his hand and speaks in a whisper of his nasally voice. "Our Father, who art in heaven, deliver these men from the evils they will soon face. Give them the strength to resist evil and its minions, to discern fact from deception, the fortitude to recognize justice, and to judge the wicked through the grace of the Lord's love. Amen." A bit taken aback by the priest's choice of words, Wiggins sits quietly as Father O'Connor returns to his own seat. "Father, you speak as if you know with certainty the evils we will face." "I'm afraid you two have stumbled on a most dangerous case. For what you embark on is not simply a quest to bring a murderer to justice, but to find a murderer who seeks to corrupt the very souls of his victims." Twisting in his seat, Wiggins leans in towards the priest. "I'm not sure I follow. Father O'Connor, do you know who did this?" "Of course I know who did this." We both lean in even closer. "Satan," Father O'Connor says plainly, "by proxy through one of his many daemons." A slight sour frown escapes Wiggins's lips as we both lean back in our chairs. "Make no mistake, gentlemen. The Church is under attack by dark, demonic forces. No ordinary person is responsible for Father Clifford's demise." "You suspect the murder is extraordinary?" Wiggins clears his throat. "Supernatural in nature?" Father O'Connor takes hold of the cross hanging from his neck, closes his eyes, and bows his head. "I know for certain the perpetrator of this crime is a soul possessed, someone in league with Lucifer himself." Rising, Father O'Connor silently makes his way across the chamber towards a bookshelf. "The men who have died at the hands of this murderer belong to an ecclesiastical court, known amongst ourselves as the Malleus Verita Divina, roughly translated, the Gavel of Divine Truth. The court primarily oversees internal church affairs." Withdrawing an old leather tome, he opens to a dog-eared page and presents the volume to us. It contains an illustration of the very thumb-to-toe irons seen on Father Clifford, but in the illustration they are not set on a man, but upon a wild-looking woman. The sorcerer's shackles. The Church has used them throughout history to dispose of those guilty of witchcraft, the means by which Father Clifford himself was murdered. Clearly, some demonic force is sending the court some sort of vile message. Rubbing his chin, deep in thought, Wiggins takes a moment to process this new information. "If you feel a deeper understanding of the Malleus Verita Divina's affairs will help your investigation, I will send word right away to grant you access to the church records room at St. Martin's Church." "Thank you, Father O'Connor. It certainly can't hurt. And the image on the back, an owl, we believe, is this also tied to the history of the Church?" Father O'Connor shakes his head. "The Church does not deal in such symbolism. I have no knowledge of the bird you speak. Do you think it's important?" "It would seem so," mutters Wiggins.
If the murderer was trying to say something in his means of execution, it would seem reasonable the owl was also part of this message.
Perhaps someone who knows of birds, a zookeeper or such, can help you with it, the priest suggests. An altar boy enters, approaches Father O'Connor, and whispers something in his ears. If that's all, gentlemen, I have a service I must attend to. We thank the priest for his time and see ourselves out. But before we leave the church grounds, Wiggins stops and looks about the streets, contemplating our direction.
The church's record room will certainly give us the church's perspective. I think we'll likely get a more impartial take at one of London's libraries. Moody's circulating library isn't far off.
We arrive at St. Paul's Cathedral and exchange brief introductions with Bartholomew, the deacon of the church. As if expecting us, Bartholomew immediately brings us to a large chancel on the east end of the church. An older man with heavy jowls and soft, calming eyes, adorned in a black chimere over an extravagant white-fluted rochet, sits in an elaborate carved wooden chair padded in purple and gold. Bartholomew clears his throat before speaking in a firm, loud voice that echoes in the chamber. "Bishop of London, Geoffrey Castrell," the deacon says with a bow. When we approach the seated man, he looks to us, presenting his hand. Instead of grasping it, we pay our respects in the traditional manner and kiss his hand. "Your investigation goes well, I pray." Fidgeting with his hat, Wiggins averts his eyes.
"Well, my lord, we've only just begun. But have no fear, we'll catch the culprit behind these abominable crimes."
The bishop smiles for a moment. "From what I've heard of Mr. Sherlock Holmes and his acquaintances, of this I have no doubt." The bishop's face suddenly turns quite sour, his expression not a reaction to anything spoken, but the suffering from an unknown physical ailment. "If there's any way we can aid your investigation, please don't hesitate to ask. The church is at your disposal."
"Thank you, my lord."
"Unfortunately, I must burden your efforts further." We pause, waiting in anticipation at the most curious remark. "The murderer must be identified and caught, of course, but there is a, dare I say, more pressing matter." Swallowing hard with a slight wince, the bishop continues. "Father Patrick Barney has gone missing, fled after hearing of Father Clifford's demise."
"Missing?"
is all Wiggins can muster. "Father Barney is a well-respected, devout member of the clergy, but I must confess in confidence he seemed panicked, almost on the brink of madness before he left. He fled his position, leaving behind a most erratic letter." The bishop looks to the deacon, sending Bartholomew across the room to search a small bookcase. As the deacon investigates the area, the door to the chamber creaks open. A young woman not long out of her teens enters, pushing a wheelbarrow filled with straw, atop which sits a small, bright blue chest. Noticing her arrival, the deacon rushes towards her. "Not now, child. His lordship is occupied." But before the deacon can reach the young woman and turn her around, the bishop shouts, startling all of us, "Don't be absurd!" Recognizing the power of his voice, he continues more softly. "The weekly wait is always bad enough, but the hours since yesterday have been particularly unbearable. Let young Katharina von Nachtreib in this instant." The bishop glances at us. "If you'll give us but a moment, my sons." We watch as the three interact in a most ceremonial fashion, passing the chest and a small glass vial from within back and forth between them. The bishop wastes no time adding a portion of the elixir to a chalice of wine and swallowing the remains of his drink in a single gulp. As hastily as the young girl entered, she departs, hardly giving us a second thought or look. The deacon moves to pass a paper gathered from the bookshelf to the bishop. His reverence waves Bartholomew off. "No, give it to them. They'll make sense of it now." Wiggins receives the paper, glancing over it with little dramatic regard. "He was quite insistent that he would be next," the bishop says. "Please, I implore you, with God's help, find Father Barney before something dreadful happens." We agree to do our best, then bow to the bishop as the deacon leads us to the exit. "My apologies, gentlemen. Time with his lordship is revered time. It should not be interrupted with delivery girls from Griffith's chemist shop."
"No, that's quite all right. Clearly the bishop is in significant discomfort. We hope it's not too serious."
Opening the front door to a heavy London air, the deacon waves his arm before us. "I'm afraid at his age it's all serious. But, God willing, this too he'll overcome." Our as-yet unanswered request to enter the temple church leaves us waiting outside in a drizzle. After a time, the clergyman who asked us to wait appears from the door of the church, only to rush by us. He intercepts two other approaching clergymen, and the three speak to each other, pointing back to us in whispers. Though they strain to keep their words private, "Here to see Father Godfrey Rossignol," escapes them with clarity. Abruptly, the group turns and proceeds together into the church. The last of them calls back before disappearing, "Please, just another moment." A few minutes later, no fewer than 6 men of the church appear at the door and gently motion us to enter. We're led to a quiet back-room office where the suspicious man in white and red from earlier in our day at the Thames hovers over a large open book set atop a pedestal. As soon as we enter, our guides bow, cross themselves, then leave, shutting the door behind them.
"How can I help you, gentlemen?"
"I believe we saw you earlier on the Thames. Our condolences on your loss."
Father Rossignol seems taken aback by our sympathy.
"Thank you, but the loss is not mine."
Wiggins stumbles over his words.
"It's just, I mean he's a member of your clergy."
Closing the book, Father Rossignol crosses the room and takes a seat behind a desk, motioning for us to sit before him.
"Of course, we all serve our father, but Father Clifford was an Anglican, a member of the Church of England."
"You say that as if it's a distinction from your own. I thought you were a member of this temple church on English soil. Are you visiting from the Vatican?"
No, not the Vatican. My family line has been a part of the temple church for generations."
Wiggins stirs and scratches his head.
"Your confusion is understandable, as most outsiders know not the inner workings of the church. You see, the ground beneath your feet is Templar soil, the temple grounds and church founded and built by Templar hands. Of course, the history of the Templars is a discussion far too involved. Suffice it to say, the temple church answers only to the monarch. We," Father Rossignol pauses, searching for the right words, "do things a bit differently to the Church of England."
Leaning back in his chair, Wiggins looks about the room.
"Can you tell us anything of Father Clifford? Did you know him?"
"Just in passing, in the time that he's been staying here."
"Staying here? Was he attempting to join your branch of the church or something?"
Father Rossignol smiles.
"No, it doesn't work like that. Father Clifford was here examining some religious texts. We have a small selection of books that are, as you would imagine, quite unique."
"And so Father Clifford stayed here on the temple grounds while researching these books? Why did he not just take the books back with him? Surely the books can be entrusted to the security of the church."
"The church can be trusted without pause. It is individual men who fill themselves with sin regardless of titles and costumes."
Father Rossignol folds his hands in front of him across the desk.
"The Church of England faces pressured times. There are some within more interested in its position of power and influence than the Word of God. We specifically requested Father Clifford remain here for his studies."
We arrive at 200 Cable Street, the address given for one Todd Blackswift, the butcher.
"Strange,"
Wiggins says as we approach a front door set with rust and rot, looking as if a quick jarring would knock it from its frame.
"The impression was this Blackswift was an educated man and one of diabolical means. Not quite the domicile I expected."
The house remains quiet and still despite our repeated knockings. Instead of leaving in defeat, Wiggins withdraws his trusted black purse. He wedges one sharply curved pick into the base of the lock and another pick set with many jagged teeth into the top.
"Not the smartest idea in a neighborhood such as this one, but nothing ventured, nothing gained, eh?"
We get into Mr. Blackswift's residence, have a quick look about, and are back outside in just a few minutes. Shutting the door behind us, Wiggins shakes his head.
"No, mate, this is all wrong. We didn't see a scrap of occult material, nor a sharp knife, nor a single strip of beef."
Again he shakes his head.
"Let's have a look around back."
Pushing our way through a most narrow passageway between houses, cluttered with old barrels and crates, we come upon a dead-end alley filled with trash and smelling worse than a dozen crime scenes. Stepping around the puddles scattered across the uneven ground, we investigate but find nothing out of the ordinary. Wiggins turns his head out of the alley but instead freezes.
"It hasn't rained in any measure for quite some time, has it?"
Instead of answering, we draw our attention to the ground, where we find not puddles of rain beneath our feet, but puddles of blood. A quick survey of the ground traces the blood back to a wall covered in long pieces of trash and old boards. We waste not a second knocking the boards over.
"Well, that's a bit more like it."
Wiggins points to a wooden door chained and padlocked. Again he calls upon his black purse.
Locked doors nil, Wiggins 100 and, to be honest, we've lost count. Inside we are immediately met with a stench stronger and fouler than the putrid stink outside. 20 decapitated rabbits hang from their hind legs, trails of blood all making their way along the grooved stone floor of the room, spilling out into the alley beneath the door. The entire room is covered in hooks, knives, and cleavers of every kind. On the far side of the room, behind a blood-spattered canvas, we find a second door, this one unlocked. We listen for a moment, hearing nothing within. Wiggins turns the round knob slowly, as if reluctant to open the door. When at last the mechanism frees and Wiggins pulls the door, we find the smallest of studies within. We inspect the room without entering, finding the entire chamber covered in black drapery and ebony candles. A collection of macabre occult symbols decorates every square inch of the room. An inverted crucifix, numerous pentagrams, and perhaps most unnerving, a perched owl carved of an unusual crimson stone, its eyes hollowed out and set with recently severed goat's eyes. A loud voice startles us from behind.
"The fuck you wankers doing in here?"
We turn to see a burly man with glasses and a wide moustache. Wiggins quickly turns to defuse the situation.
"Mr. Blackswift, is it? We're here on authority of Scotland Yard, investigating the recent murder of a priest, Father Clifford."
With heavy, deliberate steps and a narrowed gaze, Mr. Blackswift creeps towards us.
"You think I give a piss about the police, those bunch of mutton shunters? Or that fraud of cunts playing dress-up as holy men? Those bastards deserve every bit of what they get."
We shuffle to the left as Mr. Blackswift approaches, doing our best to keep our distance in a room suddenly all too close for 3 grown men. Wiggins clears his throat.
"I'm afraid, old man, whether you care or not, Scotland Yard has its eye on you. We've got a number of men waiting on a report at the corner. Now, if you can tell us where you were last night, perhaps there's no reason to pursue this matter further."
"Bollocks! I don't have to tell you two-bit thieving scoundrels a damned thing, not seeing as you ain't long for this world."
Mr. Blackswift grabs a heavy cleaver and swings at Wiggins, who gives a proper sidestep, sending Mr. Blackswift's blow into the wall. With the cleaver frozen, embedded deep in the wood, Wiggins grabs hold of one of the hanging rabbits and smashes it square in Blackswift's face just as he opens his mouth to scream something at us. His mouth fills with blood and tufts of fur. Since there are in fact no bobbies waiting for us on the corner, and far too many sharp objects in the slaughter room, we execute the better part of valor and slip down the alley, racing to our freedom. Our knock on the door at 425 Theobald's Road is answered almost immediately. The man in his late 20s stands before us in a cheap suit, his tie partially undone and his shirt-tails dangling, holding an open book in his hands and a pen between his lips. Snatching the pen from his mouth once the door is open, he barks at us as if the Queen herself shouldn't dare disturb him.
"Whatever you're on about, I've already got one. Now, 2. I'm quite in the middle of something. Thank you."
He slams the door before either of us can get a word in. A split second later, the door opens again, his face soft, looking to us most inquisitively.
"You are selling something, aren't you?"
"Not at all, lad. We're here about—"
Wiggins pauses. Something on the lad's face causes Wiggins to reassess his approach.
"We're looking for a few minutes of your time to discuss the church."
The young man's face tightens, his manner turning cold and short.
"The church?"
"Indeed. We're with the Times, of course, and we're doing an article on the corruption in positions of authority within the church. We've heard of your outspoken nature against the church and thought you might be an excellent resource."
"Well, why didn't you say so?"
A wide smile breaks across his face as he slams his book shut with one hand. Wiggins's ploy has his full attention.
"Mr. Charles Allerton, at your service, gentlemen. Please, come in."
For over an hour we get a crash course in Darwin's theory of evolution and the fraudulent nature of organized religion, complete with illustrated newspaper clippings on the subject. Ironically, Mr. Allerton has the same dedicated fervor as many of the clergymen we've encountered.
"Well, we don't want to take up all of your time, Mr. Allerton. Most certainly a man of your stature has a full schedule every day of the week. Why, I bet just last night you were in a ballroom dancing till 9 p.m. and then dining with titans of industry until well past midnight."
Humour, of course, meant to loosen the young lad's lips, and it works well enough. Allerton blushes.
"Hardly. The pub with old college friends till 6 p.m., then home for study and sleep."
When Allerton is suitably comfortable, Wiggins goes in for the kill.
"Did you happen to know a Father Clifford?"
A shiver of disgust trembles Mr. Allerton.
"Priests are the worst of the bunch, you know. They're like mindless lackeys. ignorantly accepting and regurgitating any dogma preached by their superiors, then foisting it directly onto the public, usually when they're having a troubling time. You know, we all are most susceptible to suggesting during times of stress. Truly disgusting vultures. He pauses for a moment, rubbing his chin. No, I don't recall the name at all. If he's important in their hierarchy, rest assured he's stealing his fill.
Arriving at 375 Strand Street, we find tacked to the front door a formal notice by the church announcing Father Adrian Wolseley's passing. Of course, it mentions nothing of the murder.
A shame it is, God taking his good and righteous workers like that.
We turn to see a cab driver parked at the curb, brushing down his horse.
Did you know him?
Aye, for a long time. Good man, fine pastor, important man he was.
Wiggins's brow raises.
Important, you say?
Getting a bucket down from the roof of his cab, the driver replies,
Aye, not many know, but within the church he was a man of particular power, a judge or adjudicator or some such. Like I said, for a long way I've known Father Wolseley, though even with me he spoke of it rarely.
With a tip of our hats, we bid the driver farewell and carry on. Three older women dressed in black loiter around the entrance to 81 Newgate Street. At our approach, one of them immediately calls to us, as if we are old friends.
Oh, such horrible news, the passing of Father Andrews. Did you know him well?
We pause and remove our hats.
Not as much as we would have liked.
One of the other ladies chimes in.
Such a kind man, but I always knew he was sick. I wonder what it was he actually died of.
May I ask why you assumed him sick?
He was always an alert and healthy-looking man until a couple of years back. He seemed distant and started losing weight.
The woman in the middle continues where her friend leaves off.
In recent days, he always had dark circles under his eyes, as if malnourished and without sleep. I always figured it was mainly the problems of his flock weighing heavy on his conscience. No, it was the laudanum, dear. Did you not know he was taking it? I saw it fall from his pocket during Elizabeth's wedding.
We give our condolences, then depart to continue our investigation elsewhere. Upon arriving at 40 Ludgate Hill, we are greeted by the warm, loving smile of one Sister Agatha, a woman of pale complexion and auburn hair, not much older than ourselves. Wiggins gives the usual introductions and pleasantries before getting straight to the reason for our visit.
Father Jonathan O'Connor extended us the use of the church record room in our investigation of Father Clifford's murder.
The nun gasps and covers her mouth. Realizing the unattended effect of his words, Wiggins rushes to steady her.
Good gracious, has no one told you, sister? How stupid of me!
Wiping a tear from her eye, she takes hold of Wiggins's hands.
That's quite all right. I had already been informed. One just never gets immune to hearing such dreadful news.
We follow Sister Agatha upstairs, then through a narrow door and up a second iron spiral staircase, which finally leads us into an attic room within the church. The chamber is quite large, containing 2 rows of bookcases on either side of the room. The cases stand well over 2 meters high and are crammed tight with scrolls, parchments, books, and ledgers of every type and size. We look to each other, chewing on our lips. Talk about a needle in a haystack. Sister Agatha explains the organizational system of the documents, which requires Wiggins to take a handful of notes in his journal. She then bids us well and tells us to see her before leaving. On her way back to the stairs, she turns and touches the side of her face most curiously.
Of course, it's possible the information you're looking for has been stolen.
We stop and turn back to the sister.
Stolen? How's that now, sister?
Didn't Father O'Connor mention it?
She grimaces.
Oh, of course not. He's too embarrassed. As well I should be, too. Oh, how awful. I can't give you any details other than to say that a fortnight ago this day, I came to the records room to find it in complete shambles. Scrolls and books tossed about like a child leaves his toys in a playroom.
Anything of value missing?
Mostly my pride, it would seem. When I took the position here, after the previous priest in charge departed, there were whispers that a woman would never fill his shoes, that the security of the records would be at stake.
Wiggins walks about the room, looking for any obvious clues left behind by an intruder.
Oh, I wouldn't listen to any of that. Thieves steal from men and women alike. Has the church assigned someone to investigate?
A spark flickers in Sister Agatha's eyes.
No. My superiors have decreed that the documents stolen were nothing of significant value, old trial records or some such.
Such historic records would have little value outside these walls, but, as I say, it would mean the world to me personally if they could be found. Is there any chance you fine gentlemen could locate them?"
Wiggins walks back to the sister, takes her by the arm, and escorts her to the stairwell.
"If the documents had no real value, they were likely stolen for a private collection. A thief who squirrels away the goods is very difficult to come by, but we'll certainly make some enquiries on your behalf. If we learn anything, we'll return instantly to let you know."
Content in Wiggins's promise, Sister Agatha departs, leaving us to search the remaining records. After a couple of hours of investigating, we find the Malleus Verita Divina has been called upon many times over the years for internal church matters. Its rulings seem to be fair and in step with the church doctrine, leaving no trail of bitter litigants or enraged criminals. The floorboards moan and creak against the silence of Moody's circulating library as we make our way through the seemingly endless aisles. Our search for the section on religion and belief has us lost in a literary sea of names and titles, completely unknown to us. Adding insult to injury, the library is far larger than it appears.
"Help you, gents?"
an older librarian inquires.
"We're looking for books on the church, non-fiction works, records, current affairs, etc.,
Wiggins says in his most professional tone. The librarian turns and walks off.
"You are members, correct?"
We rush to follow.
"Well,
Before Wiggins can think of a clever response, she cuts him off.
"Thought as much. Well, you gents are welcome to browse, but if you plan on borrowing so much as a single sheet of paper, you'll have to become a member of the library. The cost is 1 guinea annually."
After being shown to our section of interest, we select an armful of books and take them to a small table with 2 chairs at the end of an aisle. We lose ourselves in the reading. Wiggins comes up an hour or 2 later, rubbing his eyes with a sigh.
"Everything here points to the Malleus Verita Divina having a long-standing authority within the Church. All the cases mentioned refer to disagreements and crimes settled in an honourable, noble fashion."
Wiggins runs his finger along the front of the largest tome, tapping them against it in quick unison.
"I don't know. Something just doesn't feel quite right. Can't put my finger on it. Maybe we should study the St. Martin's Church record room and compare what we've learned here today."
An old man with a cane limps up to our periphery.
"Ah, there it is. Church of England, 6 centuries of administration policies."
The man pauses just before the table and reaches out with a jittering hand to adjust the book on our table for better viewing.
"Are you gentlemen planning on taking this book from the library, or have you finished with it?"
We rise from the table.
"Go on, take it, old boy. We've got what we needed from it, though it left us a bit wanting."
Slipping into our coats, we brush past the old man and head towards the exit, but stop as the gentleman mumbles something to Wiggins. He repeats himself at our pause.
"David Breckenridge. Let's see, I always transpose the numbers of his address. 35 East Cheap Street. Yes, that's it. Personal friend of mine, he is."
"I'm sure he's a fine chap, but why do you tell us this?"
"Well, David has a most impressive collection of religious texts and documents. He was with the clergy for many years, worked as a transcriber of Aramaic and Latin. If you gents are looking for information about the church, David's most certainly your man."
We thank the old-timer profusely for his help, then depart. An older gentleman in an apron catalogues a number of crates outside the door to 211 Holborn Viaduct.
"Would you be the owner of this fine establishment?"
inquires Wiggins. The old man nods.
"Eli Donaldson. One of the boys inside will help you with your needs."
"Actually, sir, it's you we'd like to have a word with."
"Oh?"
Mr. Donaldson turns his full attention to us.
"We're investigating a murder, and a broken vial of chloroform was found at the crime scene. The address on the vial read 211 Holborn Viaduct.
A classic Wiggins ploy, inferring a complete address where there was none. The old man scoffs and looks at us with narrowed eyes.
"You're either mistaken or deliberately lying. By the looks of you, I'll give you the benefit of the doubt and say mistaken."
Wiggins withdraws, a bit surprised that his bluff is called.
How can you be sure, Mr. Donaldson?
Turning back to his crates, the chemist growls back.
Because we don't deal in chloroform here, gentlemen. There are more stable, more effective alternatives. Have been for some time. Now, good day.
We thank Mr. Donaldson for his time and leave him to his work. Arriving at 99 Holborn Viaduct, we find a notice on the door. It reads, "Closed until further notice due to renovations. We look forward to serving you again soon." The sign is dated a fortnight prior to today. It seems unlikely any missing chloroform came from this location. We enter Griffith's chemist shop at 33 Holborn Viaduct to find an elderly woman in a dark veil talking to a middle-aged man with raven-black hair behind the counter. As he measures out a white powder into a small brass funnel, he looks to us momentarily but does not interrupt his conversation. Not wanting to intrude on what may be a most personal affair, we step to the opposite side of the shop. There we peruse the hundreds of glass jars, bottles, and other containers that cover the walls from floor to ceiling behind a long glass cabinet counters, which themselves display even more chemist wares. After a few minutes, the ring of the bell above the door announces the woman's departure, leaving us with a private consult.
Mr. Griffith, we presume?
Quickly brushing his short-cropped beard and mustache with a small wooden comb, he replies,
Certainly. What can I help you gentlemen with today?
In a flurry of motion, Mr. Griffith produces a handful of products, snatching them from a half-dozen different places.
Something to help you sleep, perhaps? Or maybe your work demands extra hours, something to keep you awake? Though you both look fine and healthy, you never can tell when bad news will arrive and weaken the nerves. I'm running an excellent sale on my patented nerve tonic.
Wiggins takes off his hat and drops it on the counter.
Actually, we're here on official business, helping Inspector Cray of the Thames River Division.
The chemist slows his manner, placing the last item in his hand back on the shelf.
I see. Well, what can I help you with?
We're investigating the recent murder of a priest, Father Clifford.
Mr. Griffith shakes his head.
Sorry, gentlemen, but the name doesn't sound familiar.
Taking out his notebook, Wiggins flips through the pages while continuing his line of questioning.
But you do work with the church?
Of course. I've been one of the church's primary druggists for a number of years. I was quite devout in my younger years. I'm afraid business has been so busy lately it's made me a poor Christian. I haven't been to the church directly in quite some time.
He turns towards an open doorway in the back corner of the store.
Katharina!
He calls out. A moment later, a beautiful young woman in her early 20s, pushing a wheelbarrow filled with small wooden crates, rushes into the storefront to greet us. Her blue eyes shimmer almost as brightly as the silver cross hanging around her neck.
I almost have the entirety of Mr. Worth's 696 Liverpool Street order gathered, Mr. Griffith.
The chemist walks over to her, taking the girl up by the shoulder.
Never mind that now, Angel. These men are asking about a Father Clifford.
He turns to us briefly.
Katharina makes all of my deliveries to the church.
The young girl thinks for a moment, turning her eyes away only for a second before making direct eye contact with Wiggins. Wiggins, that scoundrel, flushes.
I don't recall a Father Clifford. I know many of the clergy personally, but I do meet so many of them casually when I make deliveries, it's difficult to keep track.
Do you make them regularly?
For some, like the bishop, he suffers from... Tut. We shouldn't disclose things of a personal nature, my dear, unless it's relevant to the case for some reason.
No, I suppose not, replies Wiggins. Not if you can supply us with a list of Miss Katharina's church deliveries for, say, the last month.
Mr. Griffith bends down and retrieves a ledger. After flipping through it for a moment, he stops and runs his finger along a single page.
Certainly. There aren't many. A fortnight ago at St. Martin's. 9 days ago, St. John's. Of course, her weekly delivery to the bishop at St. Paul's. Then just 3 days ago, this past Sunday, to St. Giles. That's everything for the last month.
Recording this in his journal, Wiggins thanks Mr. Griffith.
Just one last thing, Mr. Griffith. Do any of Katharina's deliveries to the church include chloroform?
Mr. Griffith replies without referring to the delivery ledger.
No, none of the clergy make use of that.
Perhaps to one of your non-church clients.
The chemist looks to his young assistant, who stares back at him with large eyes.
Well, of course, but that's not unusual. Why do you ask?
Wiggins returns his notebook to his vest and takes an unusually long pause, staring at Mr. Griffith and young Katharina.
Call it a hunch, Mr. Griffith, if you will. Chloroform is a common ingredient when it comes to premeditated murder.
Katharina, please go back and finish preparing Mr. Worth's order.
The young girl nods and returns with her wheelbarrow to the back room. As soon as she's out of earshot, Mr. Griffith turns to us in a low voice.
Gentlemen, I have a confession. There's a very good chance that chloroform from my store will be used in a crime, or, I'm afraid, the very murder you speak of."
We look to the chemist with our mouths agape. He continues, quietly, but without any air of nervousness.
"Some time ago I most foolhardily left an entire box of chloroform vials outside the shop while receiving a large delivery. The box was stolen."
Mr. Griffith sighs.
"I never reported the theft, as I thought it would look most poorly on my chemist's license. I pray the person who stole it knows not its use or purpose, and it winds up in the gutter before it can do harm. But the blame is most entirely my own."
At 108 Stamford Street, we're met by a woman in ordinary clothes who introduces herself as Jessica. After our own introductions, she explains that she's the daughter of a priest from another church, and although she's not officially affiliated with the church herself, she helps out in many causes and gatherings and comes to clean the rectory once a week. As she leads us to Father Barney's room, she holds her head low and keeps her steepled fingers to her mouth the entire walk. Clearly word of Father Clifford's death has reached her and left an impression. Without a word, she pauses before a white door, set with a gold plaque and a wooden crucifix.
"I just knew something was wrong last week."
Did something happen?
She withdraws a key on a golden tasseled rope and unlocks the door.
"No, it's just Father Clifford's recent assignment dealing with the Temple Church. You know, there is a bit of bad blood between those Templar clergymen and the rest of the church. When I saw that Temple priest here last week, I don't know, I can't explain it. Something just didn't feel right."
I don't understand. If Father Clifford was dealing with the Temple Church, why did you feel uneasy about a Temple priest's visit with Father Barney?
Turning her head slightly in confusion,
"Well, they work together, of course, Father Clifford and Father Barney. I can't tell you specifically, but they were part of some church administration group or some such."
Wiggins moves to push the door open, but stops and looks back to Jessica.
May I ask, to which Temple priest do you refer?
She looks about the hall for a moment, trying to recall.
Rossignol, I believe, was his name.
Very interesting. I don't suppose you know how their visit went? Anyone complaining of noises or anything unusual?
She shakes her head.
"Nothing unusual. They were quiet as church mice in there. Couldn't have been more than a quarter of an hour. Father Rossignol was already leaving by the time I settled myself back downstairs."
Jessica opens the door and motions us in. Wiggins pauses in the threshold.
"Did you know Father Clifford well?"
"Regrettably, no. But all my interactions with him were pleasant. What kind of monsters live in this city?"
"We intend to find out. Thank you, miss."
She nods and leaves us to our investigation. Father Barney's quarters are modest, even for a priest, and for the most part unremarkable. We find a calendar on the wall with the repeated notation, Ruber, Church Tower. Though there doesn't seem to be a specific pattern, Wiggins records this in his journal. Wedged between the fireplace wood and the wall, we find a small collection of wine bottles, mostly empty, a few unopened. Wiggins picks up one of the empties and examines it.
"Seems like Father Barney enjoys his drink."
Finding nothing else of interest, we depart the rectory. On the street, Wiggins looks back at the rectory and takes off his hat to run his fingers through his hair.
"I suspect finding Father Barney will be crucial in uncovering Father Clifford's murder."
We arrive at Breckenridge's 35 East Cheap Street home and are met by a boy of about 11 years of age, playing with a toy metal railcar.
"Excuse us, old man. Would you be Mr. Breckenridge? We'd very much like to have a look at your library."
The boy rolls his eyes in an overdramatic fashion only an 11-year-old can manage.
"It's not my library. It's Uncle's library. Come on, I'll show you."
We follow the lad climbing 3 flights of stairs to the top floor, where we're led to an older gentleman eating his supper.
"Pardon us, Mr. Breckenridge. We'll call again another time."
He throws down his napkin and gets up from the table.
By the looks of your faces, it's quite important.
They want to see your library, Uncle,
shouts the boy, speaking in a volume as if Mr. Breckenridge is deaf.
Ah, collectors, are you? Always a moment to show my text to new clients. He turns to the boy. Run back downstairs, Adam. I'll show these gentlemen to the book room.
As the boy flutters back downstairs and the old man leads the way, Wiggins introduces us and paraphrases our mission and interest in seeing his books on the church. The library of the home is hardly a large room, but no other library, from Alexandria to present day, can claim to be more tightly packed with tomes and volumes of paper, parchment, and vellum. Every inch of wall space sits filled with shelves of books. Stacks of books stand precariously balanced on other stacks of books. Scrolls, parchments, and maps spill from every perceivable gap and crack. Mr. Breckenridge sits us down at a small table, barely enough for a tea setting for two, and drops 2 volumes on the church before us. As we finger through them, he shuffles by us, mumbling to himself, then returns with 2 more. This process repeats itself over and over until there are so many books, ledgers, journals, and newspapers before us, Wiggins has to put an end to it.
Mr. Breckenridge, this is more than enough. I'm afraid if you bring me any more, we'll keep you not just from supper, but breakfast, lunch, and tomorrow's dinner as well.
The old man laughs.
These are some of my most valuable volumes on the Church of England. Not monetary value, of course. I speak to their practical informational value. And a handful of books on the occult. Make yourselves comfortable, and I'll be back to check on you after I finish my supper.
Pulling his nose from the book in front of him, Wiggins looks up to the old man.
You mean to say you're comfortable leaving us here, in this treasury of antiquity?
A wide smile breaks across Mr. Breckenridge's face.
If you can't trust a couple of blokes investigating a crime of the church on behalf of Scotland Yard, then whom can you trust?
Wiggins nods as the old man hobbles out of the room. We lose ourselves reviewing the information, trying to find any useful breadcrumbs. Unfortunately, the material is overwhelming, and we accomplish little but spinning ourselves in circles. That is, until Mr. Breckenridge returns.
Well now, did you find anything of value? I'm willing to part with any of these volumes, for the right price, of course.
All excellent materials. What a wonderful collection, Mr. Breckenridge. Thank you very much for allowing us to see it. But I don't think we've found anything that would help us resolve our matter on the Malleus Verita Divina.
Pausing for a moment, the old man scratches his chin, then walks over to a shelf and draws forth one last book.
Ah, the young. So much time to waste, he giggles to himself before continuing. Gentlemen, you never mentioned the Malleus Verita Divina. If you had, I would have brought you right to this.
He lays the book before us. Its title reads, Criminum Acceptum, Trial of Witchcraft, 1800 and onward. Rubbing the dust off the cover with his bare hand, Mr. Breckenridge continues.
Bought this from an old barrister on 696 Liverpool Street, back when the neighbourhood was more farmland than houses.
We don't quite follow,
Wiggins says, turning to get a better look at the volume.
The courts you speak of, says Breckenridge. It was formed exclusively to try witches and heretics. I've heard of this court many times in my scholastic travels, though I'm certain the Church would very much prefer I had not, that no one had. Not the truth of it, anyway.
Turning to his notebook with pen in hand, Wiggins encourages Mr. Breckenridge to continue.
Please, go on. Anything you can tell us.
This book is an account of some of the trials of the Malleus Verita Divina. Mind you, none of it is written from the bench of the court itself, but rather from those the court's rulings affected in one way or another. I can tell you that this court is nothing holy or righteous. Just the opposite. The Malleus Verita Divina is a blight on Christianity and a dark stain on the Church as a whole.
Pulling out a handful of papers from beneath the books already on our desk, Mr. Breckenridge continues.
These documents here talk about a number of missing women in London proper during the last, 15 to 40 years. I spent a long time trying to find evidence connecting the missing women in this particular court, which was very fond of carrying out witch trials.
Oh, but there haven't been any witch trials for years now,
Wiggins demands with a grimace.
Indeed, but just because there's no smoke doesn't mean a fire didn't once blaze there. In any case, I could never gather enough evidence to bring the case up before a judge. A real judge, mind you. But mark my words, that court is sinister. The men who preside over it represent the wicked, dark heart of the Church.
We thank Mr. Breckenridge for his hospitality, information, and time. Wiggins gives him 10 shillings for his effort. In return, he allows us to borrow all the books we can carry, and we're able to carry a good many. In the hansom cab ride back toward Baker Street, we confirm all that Breckenridge stated. It would seem that one of this court's favorite methods of execution was death by drowning. Though we can't point to anything specific warranting a crime, it would seem that the Malleus Verita Divina has a most sinister, secretive nature. We arrive at Liverpool Street on a mixture of Wiggins's intuition and curiosity. House 696 lies recessed between two brick buildings, only accessible through a tunnel between them. To our dismay, a couple of bobbies and a large crowd of people prevent us from getting anywhere near the tunnel. It's quite the commotion. As we jostle among the perimeter of the crowd, one of the policemen recognizes us and waves us through. Once we step in line with the tunnel's mouth, we see it all too clearly. Amazing how, by design, random intuition sometimes feels. A body, dressed in a priest's gown, hangs from an iron ring at the top of the tunnel's arch. As we near, a strong scent of frankincense fills the air. "Not a good month to wear the cloth," one of the bobbies jokes poorly. "Suicide. 3 direct witnesses to it," he calls out from behind as we ignore him and move closer to inspect. It only takes a second to recognize the face, Father Jonathan O'Connor. Another officer approaches. "You 2 lads working with the Father Clifford murder, eh?" We nod, prompting him to continue. "Turned over chair. Found this on the floor nearby." We're handed a weathered and stained paper that smells as if it sat in a lockbox for the better part of 2 decades. We take a moment to read it together in silence. It's a written confession by one Simone van Nachtrieb. Although it's not quite graphic, it infers the author had repeated sexual congress with her captors and jailers, and because she neither tired nor died from the experience, it proved her guilt in cooperation with Lucifer as a witch. She signed it, requesting the Church to save her soul with a quick and righteous death by the sorcerer's shackles. The confession is validated and proved by the Malleus Verita Divina. As we try to make sense of it, the bobbies get to lowering the body. The officer before us, watching his companions, swings his baton. "I just don't fathom it. I thought suicide damns one to hell. How could a priest take his own life?" "That's quite right," a deep voice calls out. A younger priest, clean-shaven with grey eyes and a red stole, crosses himself as Father O'Connor's body comes to rest on the ground. "A priest would never accept such a fate willingly. It must be murder." We all approach and look to Father O'Connor's corpse as the rope is removed from his neck. The young priest kneels next to the body and withdraws a card tucked within the body's shirt. His eyes widen in disbelief. We look and see no writing, only a small illustration, a black crown of thorns. "Does it mean something to you?" Wiggins asks. The young priest rises and hands us the card. "I never believed I'd actually see this." "What is it, lad?" "A degree of excommunication, by Templar authority." Stepping toward the young priest, something cracks beneath Wiggins's foot, frankincense resin. 2 smaller pieces still smoldering. "Can they do that? Can the Templar priests excommunicate a priest of the Church of England?" "By presenting this card, it means they've already received approval by the monarch herself. Gentlemen, I take back what I said. I don't claim to know what's going on here, but perhaps, overwhelmed with grief and shame, this poor soul did indeed kill himself." Upon arriving at St. Philip's, we notice a crowd of onlookers at the front door. Pushing our way to the front of the pack, we find an older man reading a parchment, an official church decree by the look of it. An iron nail set in the doorframe hints to its recent posting. The document is a court summary of one Shelley Bonnet. Apparently she was tried and convicted by the Malleus Verita Divina for witchcraft back in 1861.
"All right, ladies and gentlemen. This document is evidence in a recent criminal investigation. Please move along."
Wiggins ushers the crowd off, then pockets the document so that we may return it to its rightful owner. We arrive with hastened steps at St. Pancras' old churchyard, praying we have arrived in time. A quick survey of the actual cemetery shows nothing out of order, no signs of foul play. The tombs here look as if they have not been disturbed in years. Turning our attention to St. Pancras' old church itself, we enter through an unlocked back door. Just like the cemetery, the small house of worship seems entirely empty.
"The silence here is foreboding. I don't like it,"
Wiggins mutters. Our search continues, checking every small room, every nook and cranny for any sign of Father Barney. Still nothing. Wiggins seems defeated, ready to move on, when a muffled shout, a single word, vanquishes the silence.
"Diablo!"
It comes from underfoot.
"The cellar!"
cries Wiggins. As we frantically search for some means downstairs, a commotion breaks out below us. The sound of crashing furniture, broken bottles, a moaning scream of pain.
"Do you smell that? Smoke!"
A trail of lingering gray vapor leads us at last to a narrow cellar door. Smoke and flickering lights rise from the bottom of the stone steps. Covering our mouths, we rush into the cellar, finding it in shambles. Pockets of fire blaze all around us. "Stay away from me, sorcerer! I am a servant of Almighty God!" The voice trails off as if moving away from us. Though the flames are numerous, their scope is small enough to avoid with little more than a lick of flame at our heels. With the stone construction of the cellar preventing any risk of fire spreading to the church itself, we pursue the voice deeper into the cellar. At the end of a hall, a diminutive hooded figure holding a blazing torch pins a priest against the dead-end wall. The clergyman stands 2.5 times the size of his adversary, yet clings to the wall behind him with one hand, and his crucifix in the other in unbridled desperation. It's as if the smaller man has some great power over the larger. "Stop where you are!" shouts Wiggins as we stalk up behind the hooded man, spreading out to each side of the hall in preparation of apprehending the criminal. To our surprise, the hooded attacker doesn't turn to face us, but instead motions his torch closer to the priest, who screams, "Please, stop! Don't come any closer! I don't want to die, not like this!" The passion in the priest's voice halts our progress. In turn, the hooded figure withdraws his torch, pushing out to his side in his fully outstretched arm. Only then do we finally take notice. A glistening liquid covers the priest from head to toe. "Petroleum!" shouts Wiggins. Any one of the flames burning nearby, or the assailant's torch itself, will send the priest to a most excruciating end. With not a moment to lose, Wiggins retrieves a bottle from the ground and hurls it at the attacker's hand. A direct hit elicits a high-pitched scream and sends the torch flying through a nearby archway into a secondary room. As soon as the torch is loosed, we rush to tackle the hooded man. He in turn lunges at the priest. The assailant falls against the priest, and we fall against the assailant. Our combined weights topple the cellar wall. Tumbling down a slope of crashing stones, dust, and smoke, the priest gives a shrill scream of terror. We scramble in the darkness of the new unknown chamber, grabbing, punching, and clawing at each other. Though none of us can see a damned thing, at last Wiggins shouts, "I've got him! Quickly, his torch!" Scrambling back out into the hall and reclaiming the assailant's torch, light is brought to bear in the dark chamber. To our dismay, Wiggins struggles to his feet with a bundle of cloak, absent its wearer. As we try to keep our footing on the abundance of loose stones, we shine the torchlight to the priest and help him to his feet. "Father Barney?" The priest nods, breathing in great gasps and choking on the lingering dust and smoke. "Yes, Father Barney." "Come on, old boy. We'll get you out of here into safety. Stay behind us while we put out the fires." When we turn to make our way out, Father Barney doesn't move. Instead, he reaches for a nearby stone column to steady himself. "I'm afraid, my good gentleman," he coughs and wheezes, "I have met my final punishment." Moving the torch closer to the priest, we watch as a red stain slowly forms over his heart, the exact spot of a slight tear in the fabric of his shirt. As Father Barney falls against the pillar, his breathing slows and becomes erratic. We push aside his clothes at his chest to reveal a profusely bleeding stab wound. "We started out with such pure intentions. Somewhere along the way we lost ourselves to the power bestowed upon us. Such horrible things we did to them, to her. We knew she would be the last." Pressing against the wound, Wiggins rushes to undo his ascot. "Hold still. We'll get you to a doctor." "Too late." Father Barney holds up his hand, motioning for Wiggins to stop. Knowing the wound is beyond either of us, Wiggins takes hold of the father's hand and comforts him in his final moments. "I go now to be judged for sins of the flesh that can never be forgiven." With wide, fixated eyes, Father Barney slumps to the side, the last of his breath exhausted. As he slowly slips away from Wiggins, a shiny metal object remains in Wiggins's hand, a metal owl emblem with the name Simona van Nachtreb bound to a leather strap. Only then, once the father leaves this world, do we stand up and look about us, realizing the unstable footing beneath us is not loose rubble, but bone, human bone. Wiggins looks to the walls about us, where piles of bones slope upward as high as the ceiling. He picks up a pelvic bone, followed by another, and another. Female, each and every one. An ossuary of discarded women. Upon arriving at 27 Blackfriars Road, we do a double-take and rush to confirm we have indeed arrived at the correct location. According to Wiggins's notes, We have. The church tower is not much of a tower, being no more than 20 or 30 feet high, barely taller than the angled roof of a small church on the other side of the courtyard they both share. Thick green vines encircle much of the tower, and the wooden shutters wage a war against the elements, desperate to remain in their original position. The entire area lies surrounded by wrought iron, the kind of fencing that hasn't seen a repair since its installation. It bends to and fro in many places, in some completely grown over with weeds. It takes but a minute to find a section of fence broken to the point where we can slip through with minimal effort. Arriving at the large wooden door of the tower, Wiggins tries to enter, but the handle doesn't budge. Wiggins throws his hands to his hips.
"Curious," he calls out while gazing up at the stone structure. "Why would anyone go to the effort of locking such a place?"
Calling upon his black purse, Wiggins has the door open in a few moments. Inside we find a most rudimentary study of sorts, a few bookshelves populated with so few Christian liturgical books that they lie flat on the shelves, not upright. A single seat, a small oak writing desk, and an iron stove complete the furnishings. A flight of wooden spiral steps leads up to the top of the tower. Unfortunately, wood rot and insects have eaten most of the steps at about head height, making the climb to the bell tower above quite impossible.
"Well, what do we have here?"
Wiggins investigates a simple wooden rack of equidistantly spaced nails, 3 rows of 3. Hung on each nail is an iron hoop with 1 or 2 skeleton keys. On the right side of the rack, 3 more nails are haphazardly tacked into the wood, the first having a key tied to it by string, the second key slipped over the nail by an open slot in the head of the key itself, and the third nail being completely devoid of any key or sign of a key. The last space has a handwritten note next to it that says STP. "I thought I heard a commotion. Well, who are you? What do you want?" We see only a priest's silhouette standing at the door's threshold. Wiggins quickly introduces ourselves and our intent on searching the tower, with a reference to the name and dates of Father Barney's calendar. "Well, I am Father Ruber, and yes, Father Barney has come to see me quite often."
"What did he see you about so often, if I may?"
"We've known each other for many years, young man. Of course he was quite involved in burial rites, so he came for the keys."
Looking back at the rack of keys, Wiggins asks,
"The keys?"
Taking a few steps into the tower chamber, Father Ruber extends his right hand, firmly grasping the key rack.
"I'm in charge of the keys, which open all the main cemeteries of the city."
"All of London?"
"As you say, all of London."
Wiggins points to the side where one key is missing.
"There seems to be one key missing. Which cemetery does that key open?"
With a short exhale, Father Ruber runs his trembling hand across the first row of keys.
"Let me see, my boy. Highgate, Kensal Green, Abney Park."
He continues to the next row and finally the third.
"It looks like all the keys are here."
Moving closer, Wiggins grabs hold of the nail without a key.
"Here, you didn't look at the keys on the side. The last one here, marked STP, is missing."
Father Ruber turns to us, stepping into the light for the first time, his hazel eyes drifting towards the top of the tower.
"I'm afraid looking anywhere wouldn't be much help."
For the first time, we realize Father Ruber is completely blind.
"The keys on the side are personal keys the priests deposit from time to time. Of course, Father Barney wasn't the only priest who accessed this rack. Many clergymen come and go from this place. I'm sorry, gentlemen, but I don't know what key was hung in that place, nor who put it there. I see no reason why anyone would hang a key here that did not access one of the cemeteries of London. But truthfully, one could hang a key to the Chamber of the Crown Jewels, and no one would be any wiser."
As we round the corner and walk toward the main entrance of St. Bride's Church, a bunch of rubbish papers blow across the ground, flying straight towards us. We have to hop and wiggle to avoid getting them stuck to our ankles. When we arrive at the front steps of the church, we see the source of the rubbish, a pile of papers dumped just before the front door.
"Strange,"
Wiggins says, kneeling down to examine the papers. Almost instantly he takes one up in hand.
"Quickly, lad, go back and grab those other papers, if they haven't blown away."
The entire batch of papers are not trash at all, but numerous trial documents from Malleus Verita Divina proceedings, ranging from 1854 to 1863. They are all different but similar, recording the accounts of various women tried and found guilty of witchcraft. We gather each and every document we can find, intent on seeing that this part of history, however dark, is never forgotten. Climbing the steps to St. Karen's Church, we see a parchment tacked to the front door, flapping in the wind.
Looks like the church is closed for some reason,
Wiggins speculates. Upon closer inspection, we find the document is indeed an article of the church, just not the one we expected. It's a confession by one Lady Salisbury, followed by the official trial and conviction decree of the verdict of witchcraft, sentenced to death, signed by the Malleus Verita Divina, dated 1860. We arrive at St. Pancras' new church to find an unrolled parchment tacked to the front door with 2 iron nails. The document is a confession by one Veronica White, followed by the official trial and conviction decree. Mrs. White found guilty of witchcraft, her sentence, death, signed by the Malleus Verita Divina, dated 1861. After taking the document down and inspecting it thoroughly, Wiggins rolls it up and places it inside his vest.
This looks like it belongs in St. Martin's record room. At our earliest convenience, we'll return it to the sister in charge.
Outside St. Sepulchre's Church, 3 clergymen stand huddled together in front of the door, speaking in agitated tones. At our approach, they straighten up and draw silent. One of them moves to hide something behind his back, some sort of paper by the looks of it.
Gentlemen, we're investigating the murder of Father Clifford. That document may be vital to our investigation.
I think not, scoffs one of the clergy. Another growls, give it to him. The document is a confession by one Veronica White, followed by the official trial and conviction decree. Mrs. White found guilty of witchcraft, her sentence, death, signed by the Malleus Verita Divina, dated 1861. After taking the document down and inspecting it thoroughly, Wiggins rolls it up and places it inside his vest.
This looks like it belongs in St. Martin's record room. At our earliest convenience, we'll return it to the sister in charge.
Morning, Governor, Wiggins shouts at the constable slumped back in his seat behind the police station front desk, completely unconscious. The officer moves his hat above his brow and looks to us with a facial expression impossible to decipher, somewhere between a snarl and a half-smile. Help you, gents?
A bit slow around here today, eh?
The officer only grunts in response. With a sigh, Wiggins continues.
We're helping Mr. Sherlock Holmes with a murder case, and we're wondering if we could see what you have on this brute that's been running amok.
Folding his arms before him, the officer speaks in a mockingly monotone manner. If we had something on him, we wouldn't be posting for leads in the Times, now would we?
Not one to be goaded, Wiggins keeps his calm.
"Come now, old man, you've got to have something."
All right, the officer says, most irritated. Something just came in earlier today. Got a report of a chap fitting his description causing a ruckus on a coach to Southampton yesterday. Leaning on the counter with one arm, Wiggins looks about the station, which is not only in need of much repair, but a thorough cleaning.
"And you think it's legitimate?"
Leaning on the counter with one arm himself, facing Wiggins directly, the officer speaks with a slight grin. Well, it seems the brute we're looking for has a knack for breaking people's fingers, and the report from the coach said that a giant of a man snapped the driver's fingers before ejecting him from the carriage and kicking out the passengers. Have it as you will. Not seeing a connection to our own case, we thank the officer and move on.
The Waddesdon Manor Aviary welcomes us, for a shilling each. Having just recently opened to the public, the grounds buzz with visitors. It takes a few minutes to corner a groundskeeper.
"Excuse us, old man, but we're wondering if someone can help us identify this creature."
Wiggins holds up his notebook with a sketch of Father Clifford's brand. The aviary help looks at it briefly, then darts his attention elsewhere. "It's a bird," he says with a gruff tone. Before either of us can answer, he shoots off, wildly waving one hand. "Oh, don't throw anything at the cages, lad. These are nervous creatures."
"Perhaps we need to come back after hours, when things have settled down a bit."
Wiggins goes to return his book to his vest pocket.
"Mind if I have a look, sir?"
We turn to find a bright-eyed young man just out of his teens, carrying a bucket of cracked corn and seed. Wiggins offers the drawing without comment.
"As you Otis,"
the lad nearly shouts, with but a second looking at the picture.
"As you what now?"
asks Wiggins, looking back at the picture himself as if he missed something glaringly obvious in his sketch.
"To be fair, it might be any of the strigiforms. The illustration is quite rudimentary."
"English, old boy?"
The young lad's brow furrows.
"Owl, sir. I'd say a long-eared owl. Common enough. Though, like I say, an illustration that rough could be any owl. If the artist didn't have a mind of avifauna, he could have just been trying to draw up any old bird."
As Wiggins nods, the young man takes the book up in his hand and examines the drawing more closely.
"But these marks here, sir, they have nothing to do with birds. They look more like a bad take on some old heraldic shield emblem."
Wiggins pulls the book back, and we both review the image again with vigor.
"Good show, lad. What's your name?"
Wiggins drops his hand to his vest pocket, looking for a coin. Tipping his hat, the lad offers with a smile, "Walter Rothschild says." The name freezes Wiggins's search for currency. The son of one of the wealthiest families in London would only find a tip insulting.
"Thank you, lad. You very well may have helped put us on track to solving a murder case for Scotland Yard."
"Murder?"
A sense of pride washes over the boy.
"Sirs, you should visit a family friend, Mr. Henry Vaughan. Henry's a scholar in heraldry and peerage. If that illustration indeed represents something specific, old Henry will surely know."
We thank the lad again for his help and leave the exploration of the most wonderful aviary to another day. The gates at 71 The Strand deposit us into a courtyard of a large warehouse where no fewer than a dozen wagons, partially loaded with crates of wine bottles, wait to depart. 20 workers pack and transport the wine from large open loading bays onto the wagons. The scene is a bit hectic. "Gentlemen, you've come on the busiest shipping day of the year. How can I help you?" A bearded man with a large round stomach and ink-stained hands motions us over. As we approach, he takes to inking a stamp and stamping a single crate on the back of a fully loaded wagon, with the same capital H seen on Father Barney's wine bottles. "All set, Ricardo. 696 Liverpool Street." He waves, and with a loud cry sets the wagon's horses off.
"We're here on account of Father Clifford."
"What about him?" Wiggins removes his hat.
"Perhaps you didn't hear. Father Clifford was found murdered."
The gentleman inspecting the crates of wine in the next wagon stops and looks at us with wide eyes.
"No! Father Clifford? When? How?" "That's what we mean to find out, sir. Our investigation has led us to Father Barney, who we noticed had a number of wine bottles from this winery, but they did not carry the proper stamps. We thought—"
Our bearded host chuckles and interrupts Wiggins. "And Father Barney directed you here, of course." Dropping his eyes to the ground momentarily, Wiggins confesses with a pitch of uncertainty in his voice,
"I'm afraid Father Barney has gone missing."
"Missing?" the man asks, his eyes the size of saucers. "Come, he continues, setting down his stamp and moving past the workers. We follow through one of the dock doors and into a long hall without a word. "I am Oscar Hortense, owner of the winery." Oscar leads us into a room where a pretty woman with olive skin and grey hair sits at a typewriter. "And this is my lovely wife, Olivia." Mrs. Hortense stops typing and begins to rise, but Oscar steps over and places his hand on her shoulder, keeping her seated. "Sit, my love. These men bring most unfortunate news." Her eyes well with tears as Wiggins explains the circumstances. "Gentlemen, I brought you to see my wife because she was Father Barney's acquaintance more so than myself. Darling, they want to know about the wine you gave him."
"Oh, my, of course,"
she mumbles, trying to compose herself.
I always give Father Barney a bottle of our tasting wine when he visits. He has an excellent nose and palate for wine. I've always valued his feedback, and I know the priests don't get the money to indulge in the fine wines we produce."
Wiggins looks around the room.
"Did he mention anything the last time he visited? Hint of anyone who might have meant to do him or any of his colleagues harm?"
"Goodness, no,"
Mrs. Hortense says with tears falling down her face.
"But I knew something was wrong."
She stands and slides past her husband toward a glass cabinet. Wiggins turns his attention to her and steps near. She unlocks a drawer in the cabinet and withdraws a small jewelry box.
"He came just the other day. Frantic is the only word I could use to describe his manner. He expressed his gratitude for our friendship and all the expensive wine we had given him over the years, and demanded I accept this as payment."
She opens the box, revealing it filled with gold sovereigns. "Good God, Olivia! You never told me of this."
"What else did he say, Mrs. Hortense? He must have said something."
She thinks for a moment while wiping her tears with a cloth.
"He only blessed us and told me that he was off to see his wife."
Mrs. Hortense breaks down in heavy sobs. Oscar rushes to her side to console her. Snapping his fingers with a shake of his head, Wiggins laments,
"A wife! How foolish of us not thinking of it sooner."
As we rush from the room, he calls back,
"I'm sure the church will have her address. Thank you for your—"
Pausing her sobs for a moment, Mrs. Hortense speaks over Wiggins.
"You don't understand, sir. Father Barney's wife is dead, put beneath the earth, buried in St. Pancras Cemetery in 1880.
An older maid wearing a hairnet and missing a number of her front teeth answers at 111 Aldersgate Street. Keeping her lips tightly pressed together, she speaks in short, direct sentences. We exchange introductions and request to see Mr. Vaughan, to which she turns away and replies,
"This way."
We arrive in a master bedroom and find a man at least 2 decades our senior, sitting up in bed drinking tea.
"I'm sorry, missus. If you had said Mr. Vaughan was indisposed, we would have called another time."
Placing his cup on the nightstand, the older gentleman coughs and waves us over.
Nonsense. I'm not indisposed at all. Just a bad back that flares up at the slightest upset. Now, come in. What can I do for you, gentlemen?"
Wiggins takes out his notebook.
"I'll get right to the point then, Mr. Vaughan. We work with Mr. Sherlock Holmes and are currently engaged in the investigation of a murder. This sketch here is a reproduction of a mark branded on the murder victim. At first we thought it a mere depiction of a bird, but after talking with a young expert of avian creatures, Mr. Walter Rothschild, he suggested we come see you."
"Ah, Walter's a character, but a good lad."
Mr. Vaughan leans over with a twinge and takes Wiggins's book in his hands. He fetches his glasses from the nightstand next to his tea.
"Well, this is far too simple an illustration to represent a family crest. Are you sure there weren't any more elements to it?"
Wiggins shakes his head.
"None. This was the image in its entirety."
"I don't think it's any official mark of lineage, gentlemen. No, I rather suspect it's a personal mark from someone of common background."
"Common background?"
Wiggins asks, skewing his head slightly.
"Indeed. Heraldic imagery and family crests go back to knighthood, nobility, and land ownership."
Stirring in his bed to get a better look at Wiggins's illustration, Mr. Vaughan continues,
"But sometimes wealthier commoners with no such history or affiliations like to create a personal seal, usually something that reflects their name, status, or profession. I think that's likely what you have here."
Mr. Vaughan passes the book back to Wiggins, who asks,
"Any idea what name could be associated to such a symbol?"
With a groan of pain, Mr. Vaughan struggles to get out of bed. The maid rushes over to his side.
"Foolish old oaf. Rest your back, not walk about the house."
"Nag. Over there, then, 3rd shelf, a thick book with a crimson spine."
"Please, allow me."
Wiggins says, placing his hand on the maid's shoulder. Moving to the bookshelf, Wiggins locates the book Mr. Vaughan requested. As he goes to pass it to the old man, Mr. Vaughan waves Wiggins off.
Go on, keep it. It's a record of common surnames and their meanings. Of course, there's the obvious. Bird, an occupational surname for handlers and hunters, but I have a feeling your fellow won't be so obvious.
We'll return the book as soon as we're done with it,
Wiggins replies. We thank Vaughan and the maid for their help and depart to find a quiet place to study the volume. As we conclude our investigation of Father Clifford's murder as best we can, we receive word to meet Holmes at King's Cross Station. Setting off without delay, we arrive at the station just before the top of the hour and are met with a sea of tightly packed commuters. Pushing our way through, we reach Track 2 as directed, just as the station workers light the overhead gas lamps. Holmes stands outside, leaning against one of the cars well into a pipe of his finest leaf. He nods at our approach.
"Holmes," Wiggins shouts, "we thought you off to Dover."
Something about this case begged me to delay my trip. I sent Watson on ahead to Dover and planned to board this car and join him as soon as you relay the facts of the case. Fidgeting in place like a schoolboy sent in front of the class to solve a problem, Wiggins searches for his confidence.
"Right, Holmes, I think we have it this time."
Holmes raises his hand, cutting Wiggins off, then turns his attention to his pocket watch. "Hold tight, lad. We're waiting on one other— here he comes now." We turn to see a tall man in a long coat and hat, flowing beard and long locks of hair falling from beneath his hat rim. Something about his deep-set eyes gives us pause.
"Godfrey Rossignol,"
Wiggins bursts out at last, with a nod. "Well, Holmes, as a courtesy to your reputation, I came as requested. Now, if you'll tell me what this is about—" Holmes puffs on his pipe. "Why, murder, of course." Rossignol shakes his head. "Gentlemen, I have no authority over these matters. Even within the church itself there are others more properly equipped for such discussions." Holmes raises a finger. "If you will, Father Rossignol, I think it is in your interest to remain. Allow me to recount the case at hand. Mr. Wiggins, seeing as you have the pulse of this case, please correct me if I make an incorrect deduction." Wiggins nods with a slight grin. "Now, this case began with the murder of Father Clifford, drowned in a most particular means, with a brand seared into his flesh. The method of the murder, not just a message from the murderer to the victim, but a message to all, a dispatch meant to expose Father Clifford and his secret ecclesiastical court known as the Malleus Verita Divina, specifically for its diabolical witch trials in which they themselves murdered women in the name of their so-called divine justice." Wiggins shakes his head.
"Bloody dreadful,"
then stumbles to quiet himself so Holmes may continue. "The brand was not a boast, but a confession, a calling card to declare for all to see who indeed performed this act of— well, we'll get to that in a moment. Now, as we already know from Father Rossignol, Father Clifford was not the first priest to be murdered by our killer. Quite the contrary, he was the third. Bart's Hospital holds the facts of two other priests, Father Adrian Wolseley, crushed to death, and Father William Andrews, burned at the stake. Again, each murder scene left with a calling card, an owl, and something more, a single wheel track.
"A velocipede track, so we're told."
"Too wide for a velocipede tread, Mr. Wiggins, but this mistaken conclusion is no fault of yours. I know you, like myself, had not seen the track firsthand. No, these tracks were made by a single-wheeled device, a device used to actually move the unconscious bodies to the place where they would be disposed of." Wiggins snaps his finger.
"Something of a wheelbarrow."
"Exactly, Mr. Wiggins. A deduction verified by the murderer's identity, and for that we look to the only other clue we have, a fragment of glass from Holborn Viaduct that most certainly contained chloroform, an agent that can render a man unconscious, allowing a much smaller individual to overpower him." Wiggins interrupts, mumbling at first, then raising his voice with clarity.
"Access to drugs, a wheelbarrow, and ingress to the church. Why, it's that sweet girl, Katharina von Nachtreib."
"Indeed, Mr. Wiggins, and to confirm we need look no further than our dear girl's last name, von Nachtreib, otherwise known as Bird of the Night. You may have known this beforehand, or perhaps you came across a codex of surnames in the possession of one book collector, David Breckenridge." Dropping his head deep in thought and puffing steadily on his pipe, Holmes begins to pace before his audience. We have the means and the opportunity. Now all that remains is the motive, and for that we need to turn to a historic account of what the Malleus Verita Divina actually did over the last 50 years. I have my own sources for such information, but in this case Mr. Breckenridge had an accurate written account of the Malleus Verita Divina's true nature, capturing poor unmarried women off the streets of London and trying them as witches, then ultimately executing them to cover their lustful, devilish crimes. Rossignol speaks softly. "We had suspected the Malleus Verita Divina of their crimes for some time, but they were protected from investigation until the murderer forced our hand." Wiggins speaks out with a hastened pace.
"Then Katharina was seeking out the members of the court, extracting revenge for the court's offences, but Katharina herself is far too young to have escaped them, plus she's working for the church for many years." Pausing for a moment, Holmes raises his pipe towards Wiggins. "Indeed.
It was not her own insult she sought to avenge, but such offence to her mother, Simona von Nachtreib. Holmes withdraws a parchment from inside his vest and hands it to Rossignol. One of the stolen trial documents from St. Martin's Church's record room, the trial of one Simona von Nachtreib.
It all fits, then, Wiggins continues with a heavy sigh. I'll let Inspector Cray know, and he'll put out a bulletin to find young Katharina and pick her up.
Holmes shakes his head, upturning his pipe and tossing the ashes. That's quite unnecessary, he says, raising his empty pipe and tapping the rail car window behind him. We look up to see a small figure seated in the car wearing a hooded cloak. The figure turns at Holmes's tapping, revealing the scared, tired face of one Katharina von Nachtreib. Holmes motions to the young girl, and she rises and moves to exit the car.
Holmes! Aiding a criminal!
Wiggins shouts out, having to catch himself in lowering his tone. Before Wiggins can make any further accusations, Katharina appears at the railcar boarding steps. Looking to us with darting eyes, she breathes deeply and lifts her chin, as if preparing to throw herself to the lions. She steps off the train and falls in alongside Holmes. Katharina, these men wish to take you to Scotland Yard to answer for your crimes. What say you? The girl's eyes well up with tears. She struggles to swallow.
As you wish, Mr. Holmes. I know what I did was wrong.
Her confession breaks the tension weighing heavily in the air. That is, on everyone but Holmes. She continues, a single tear running down her cheek.
It doesn't matter what happens to me now. By avenging my mother and taking lives, I have most certainly condemned my immortal soul to hell for all eternity.
Wiggins lurches forward, swept up in the passion of her answer.
Then why in heaven did you do it, girl?
She looks up to Wiggins, her soft, angelic face as far removed from the face of a murderer as possible.
My mother committed no crime, yet those men, those demons, they just kill her, and many others, they tortured them, did unspeakable, sinful things with them.
She turns away, hiding her face in shame and guilt.
Dearly beloved, avenge not yourselves, but rather give place unto wrath, for it is written, Vengeance is mine, I will repay, saith the Lord.
She pauses after the Bible verse.
I know this in my heart. I tried to believe it all the years I served the church, but always the thought of my mother's end festered within me, until at last I had a revelation, that I was the instrument of justice through which the Lord would work.
Turning to face us all directly, her eyes no longer in tears, young Katharina speaks, though her attention seems distant.
I don't mean to say God made me do it, only that he allowed me to do it. He must have. If not, if I did all those horrible things to those men of my own accord—
She chokes up and struggles to force the last words out.
It would make me a monster, just like them.
She sighs and looks back to Holmes.
As I said, it doesn't matter what happens to me now. My mother and all the other victims can rest in peace.
Taking Katharina by the shoulder, Holmes looks to us. Now, my good students, I will teach you a final lesson in our profession, one I have waited so very long to reveal, as it is the trickiest lesson of all to learn. There are crimes of man's law and crimes of natural law. No policeman, judge, or detective holds court over the morality of man. Such is the tribunal for only the highest court. Isn't that right, Father Rossignol? Rossignol bows slightly. As you say, Mr. Holmes.
But Holmes, Wiggins interjects, she shouldn't have taken the law into her own hands. England is a land of laws, or a land of nothing.
Indeed, Mr. Wiggins, and I don't mean to shield her from them. Not at all. You see, I found this pitiful thing terrified to death, broken in spirit, running from St. Pancras, covered in blood and ash. After putting the pieces of the crime together, I have every confidence the Church would silence her before bringing her to trial. As such, I will bring her to Scotland Yard myself, where she will answer for her crimes in an open, public forum for all of London, no, all the world, to see. Holmes smiles at Katharina, then turns to face Rossignol. This is why I summoned you here, Father Rossignol. As a representative of the Church, I leave it in your hands. Shall young Katharina be tried for her crimes now in our courts, or shall she live out the rest of her life in peace and answer to them in the highest of courts in due time? The choice is completely up to you, your lordship. Godfrey Rossignol nods. I will relay all that you have revealed, Mr. Holmes, but I suspect your assumptions are correct. The Church will likely sweep the entire matter under the rug, casting aside the lives of a few corrupt men to save a great many more corrupt men. Rossignol bows, then turns and walks away, but after only a step or two he stops and looks back over his shoulder. Do be sure that she lives the rest of her life as a proper Christian. If she were to take another life, this would not only be an offence to the Church and the law, but to the Templars as well. Rossignol then turns around, facing the crowd of the station as he primps his clothes. And do find someone to look after her, Mr. Holmes. You can always be welcome back into the arms of the Lord, as they say, but one's own conscience may not be as forgiving.